Hello there, you're watching All 24 News, news program with me, Karim Fazakri, and up next are the headlines. Algerian MPs discuss new law to criminalize French colonialism, calling it a historic sovereign step to defend the nation's history. In Algeria, still Iran receives first iron ore shipment in January, and Algeria champions its African-Russian alliance as a pillar of a more just world. Next up, international momentum builds up for Western Sahara's self-determination, with Algeria and African nations rejecting imposed solutions. And later on, amid warnings of a worsening siege against children, a school in Gaza is bombed, and global criticism grows over US sanctions against ICC judges. All this and more shortly. Welcome back. It's great to have you with us tonight. First up in our news, Algeria's National People's Assembly, or the lower house of parliament, held a special session on Saturday to debate a bill that would criminalize French colonialism. Presenting the draft law, Parliamentary Speaker Ibrahim Boughali called it a sovereign step, one that reaffirms Algeria's commitment to international relations built on mutual respect, equality, and cooperation. He said it also rejects any attempts to obscure history or deny colonial crimes.
It is an honor to stand before you today to present the proposed law criminalizing French colonialism. This proposal is not merely a legislative initiative, but a moment of awareness and fidelity, a defining moment in the history of modern Algeria. Through this legislative act, the state renews its covenant with national memory and the conscience of history. The issue of criminalizing colonialism concerns the entire nation, a cause that transcends sensitivities and sets aside divisions. This session is therefore not a routine parliamentary procedure, but a sovereign act in every sense, a moral stance of clarity and a political message of conviction. It reaffirms Algeria's unwavering commitment to its inalienable rights, its loyalty to the sacrifices of its people, and its devotion to the legacy of its martyrs.
In the same context, Parliament Speaker Ibrahim Boughali said the bill marks a pivotal moment for modern Algeria, reaffirming the nation's commitment to preserving its history. Let's take a listen.
By taking this sovereign step, Algeria reaffirms its commitment to building international relations founded on mutual respect, equality, and constructive cooperation. At the same time, it firmly rejects any attempt to distort the truth or deny past crimes, for genuine reconciliation can only rest on the pillars of acknowledgement, apology, and reparation. The proposed law criminalizing colonialism is not merely a look back at history, but rather a moral and historical commitment to the future, a pledge to generations yet to come. It underscores that Algeria will remain faithful to its history, steadfast in its principles, a defender of its people's dignity, and a champion of a world guided by justice and peace.
On the same occasion, and for his part, Minister of Mujahideen or War Veterans Affairs Abdelmalik Tashrif said Algeria remains committed to its sovereign right to safeguard its history and defend its collective memory. Speaking in a plenary session of the National People's Assembly, he said the draft law reflects a deep national awareness of Algeria's collective memory.
اقتراح موضوع قانون يتعلق بتجريم الاستعمار الفرنسي للجزائر.
The proposal of a bill aimed at criminalizing the French colonization of Algeria is an initiative that reflects a deep national consciousness and a considerable historical responsibility toward the collective memory of the Algerian nation. This qualitative measure will strengthen the national legislative system tasked with protecting national memory and will affirm that the state, with all its constitutional institutions, is committed to its sovereign right to preserve its national history and to defend its memory by all possible means and mechanisms. Recalling the crimes of French colonization is not merely an evocation of the past, it is also a moral and historical duty. The heinous colonial crimes suffered by Algeria are not subject to statutes of limitation under all international principles and conventions, and it cannot be erased by oblivion. They must instead be addressed through the recognition of these crimes. There is no human justice without recognition, and no dignified future without equity.
ولا مستقبل كريم بدون إنصاف.
In similar lines, Algerian Minister of State and Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf highlighted the role of African-Russian cooperation in advancing decolonization. Speaking at the second African-Russian Partnership Foreign Ministerial meeting in Cairo, he said Algeria supports establishing an international day to combat colonialism and to criminalize it unequivocally under international law.
From a political perspective, we first emphasize the importance of African-Russian consensus in contributing to the completion of the process of criminalizing colonialism, particularly in our African continent. We also commend the discussions hosted by Algeria at the beginning of this month through the organization of an international conference dedicated to condemning colonialism and establishing its legal criminalization. In this context, we strongly support the idea of establishing an international day to combat this abhorrent phenomenon, which has no place either in today's world or in the world of tomorrow.
On the same occasion, Algerian Minister of State and Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf said the African-Russian partnership can serve as a key pillar for a more just and equitable international order. Speaking at the second African-Russian Partnership Foreign Ministerial meeting in Cairo, he said existing strategic agreements can help unify efforts toward peace, security, and shared prosperity without exclusion or discrimination.
We meet today to open a new chapter in the Algerian-Russian partnership, a partnership in which we take great pride for its illustrious history, draw pride from its distinguished present, and look forward with confidence and conviction to exploring its promising future horizons. In this context, I can only reaffirm our commitment to contributing to the strengthening of the priorities that have shaped and continue to shape the core of this partnership, priorities that fully align with the objectives of Africa's Agenda 2063 across its various political, security, economic and social dimensions.
On the same occasion, Mr. Attaf reiterated Algeria's commitment to advancing the priorities of the African-Russian partnership in line with the goals and the full scope of Africa's Agenda 2063.
Based on strategic convergences in a world marked by the decline of values, the imbalance of power, and the loosening of controls and sanctions, Algeria believes that the Africa-Russia partnership has reached a degree of maturity that allows it to contribute significantly to the construction of a more just and equitable international system. A system based on international law as an impartial arbiter before which all nations are equal, a system based on multilateralism, a participatory approach that excludes no nation, a system that elevates the status of our international organization as a unifying space to resolve disputes and unite efforts and initiatives to establish peace, security, and prosperity for all our nations without exceptions, selection, or discrimination.
Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf praised the shared commitment to African-led solutions for African challenges. He stressed the importance of building stronger national capacities and rejecting foreign interference.
On the security front, we welcome the renewed commitment of the African-Russian partnership to the principle of African solutions to African problems in a context of escalating terrorist threats on the continent and rising tensions, crises and conflicts. Faced with these challenges, our partnership must aim to support national capacities, reject external interference, and promote political approaches and peaceful solutions.
Algerian Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf held talks with his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov on Saturday on the sidelines of the event. The Algerian Foreign Minister says the ministers, or the Algerian Foreign Ministry, says the ministers reviewed their country's strong ties and cooperation. They looked ahead to the upcoming high-level meetings aimed at deepening the remarkable momentum in bilateral relations. The two sides also exchanged views on regional issues, particularly the latest developments in the Sahel. On the sidelines of the Africa-Russia Partnership Forum still, Algeria's Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf held bilateral talks with Burundi's Foreign Minister Edouard Bizimana. The two leaders praised the strong historical ties between their countries and pledged to deepen cooperation ahead of the upcoming bilateral events. Mr. Attaf also congratulated Bizimana on Burundi's upcoming African Union presidency and stressed the need for close coordination to support peace, security, and development across the continent. On the sidelines as well, Algeria's Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf met with his counterparts from Egypt and Tunisia. The three countries, all neighbors of Libya, discussed the latest developments there and the ongoing challenges in the region. They agreed to strengthen consultation and coordination, paving the way for the next tripartite meeting, which Tunisia will host early next year. In a different development, Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune highlighted major progress by the nation's industrial sector. He made the remarks while opening the 33rd Algerian Production Fair in Algiers. President of the Republic Abdelmadjid Tebboune specifically praised the military industry for its high level of national integration and use of local materials. He called it a driving force behind genuine Algerian production.
الحديد بتاعنا الزاج تاع جيجل لونجان تاعنا
ما شاء الله لونجا نفس تاعنا لونجا كاين لونجا هنا وكاين من برا تشوفوا
انا اقول لك شوف لا نركز على الصناعه العسكريه اولا جوده فيها الجوده فيها الروح الوطنيه العاليه غزو مساحات جديده من التكنولوجيا ومن كذا وثالثا الاكتفاء الذاتي وانتم قاطره خرجنا من هذيك تاع زمان يجيب دي كيت يجي كلكو بوان سودير يقول لك انتاج جزائري ماهوش انتاج جزائري تركيب بتات مي بالنسبه للجيش انا نلاحظوا باللي فيه كل معرض فيه تقدم.
On the same occasion, President Abdelmadjid Tebboune highlighted the role of military industries in advancing Algeria's strategic projects, stressing the importance of collaboration with universities and emerging institutions.
مادام الجامعات ثاني عندها دي ستارت اب عندهم نفس المنهج عندنا ما نديروش حاجه مدمجه.
President of the Republic Abdelmadjid Tebboune announced that the first train carrying iron ore from Gharj Bilat in Tindouf will reach Iran by the end of January. Speaking at the 33rd Algerian Production Fair, he called it a historic milestone, the first time iron ore has traveled nearly 2,000 kilometers to Iran since Algeria regained sovereignty.
25 pays, pratiquement tous les pays de l'Union européenne, monsieur le Président.
Non, on sera à Béchar au mois de janvier, Inch'Allah.
On sera là, on sera là.
On ira visiter le minerai va arriver à Oran, Inch'Allah. Fin janvier, le minerai est à Oran. C'est historique que nous faisons avec nos amis turcs. Pour la première fois depuis notre indépendance, on emmène le minerai à Oran à partir il y a 750 km Oran-Béchar et 1000, donc presque 2000 km, c'est le minerai algérien.
Visiting the Tansiali Algeria Iron Complex, President of the Republic Abdelmadjid Tebboune urged the European Union to open its market to high-quality Algerian steel without restrictions, noting that Algeria offers preferential treatment rather than quota system in its trade practices.
L'Union européenne nous ouvre le territoire. احنا les produits تاعهم c'est pas par quota. On leur donne la préférence pour d'autres pays, par rapport à d'autres pays. Surtout que l'acier est d'excellente qualité. Ça, on va le voir, c'est pas معليش, on va le voir مع l'Union européenne.
And at the Pharmaceutical Industry Pavilion, President of the Republic Abdelmadjid Tebboune praised the sector's achievements, calling on Algerian pharmaceutical companies to make Algeria a key vaccine supplier for Africa.
أنا نقاسمك الفخر بالنسبة لنا كجزائريين كل رئيسا ولا مواطنا أننا وصلنا لهذه الدرجة تاع إنتاج الأدوية. الجزائر معروفة رائد على مستوى الإفريقي، ربما حتى على مستوى بعض القارات الأخرى وجزء من القارات أمريكا اللاتينية وغيرها. أتمنى باش نزيد نواصل، وهذا شرف كبير أننا نصل إلى هذا المستوى ونطمح إلى ما أحسن. أنا نطلب منكم الاتصال مع أشقائنا الأفارقة أننا نحاول كيفاش نكون المنبع نتاع اللقاحات بالنسبة للأمراض الإفريقية.
And visiting a ceramics production complex exporting to over 35 countries, the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, praised the quality and reputation of its products, urging the company to expand and further develop its operations.
عندكم شهرة، عندكم سمعة لأن العمل جيد، الكارير تاعكم ملاح، كارير درجي خيرين، باقي دروك زيدوا وسعوا.
In the same context, the President of the Republic reaffirmed the state's determination to recover looted funds abroad, especially in tax havens, and welcomed the launch of several industrial units financed through recovered assets.
كارثة اللي عاشها البلاد تاع الاختلاسات وتضخيم الفواتير وهذه اليوم لازم نسترجع المال تاع الدولة، المال المكمون يعني اللي مدسين وما فقناش به في ليزيل فيارج وفي غيرها يجي نهارو. مي انتوكا الامور اللي ظاهره هذه تسمح للخزينه باش تسترجع جزء من آلاف الملايير الدينارات.
Moving on to another story now, the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination received broad international backing at a high-level UN General Assembly meeting marking the 65th anniversary of the Declaration on the granting of independence to colonial countries and peoples. Many countries stress that delaying this right contradicts the 1960 Declaration and undermines the UN's commitment to justice, equality, and the rule of law. In the same context, Algeria's UN Permanent Representative, Mr. Benjama, said denying the Sahrawi people right to self-determination is a setback for humanity. Speaking at the UN General Assembly's 65th anniversary plenary on the Declaration on the Granting of Independence to Colonial Countries and Peoples, he highlighted that some peoples continue to face severe violations of their fundamental rights and human dignity.
When General Assembly Resolution 1514 was adopted, one must ask whether its architect could have imagined that more than 6 decades later, we will still be debating the persistence of colonialism. We will still confronting the reality that entire peoples remain denied their inalienable rights to self-determination, to freedom. Today's commemoration is first and foremost an occasion to honor the struggle of people living under foreign occupation, to remember their suffering, and to reaffirm our unwavering solidarity with them in Palestine, in Western Sahara, and elsewhere in all remaining non-self-governing territories.
Similarly, South Africa expressed deep concern over Western Sahara, stressing that the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination, is of utmost importance. Its representative urged Morocco and the Polisario Front to engage in direct and conditional dialogue to achieve a just and lasting political solution.
South Africa is particularly concerned about the plight of the people of Western Sahara, the last remaining colony on the African continent. South Africa remains nation of the people of Western Sahara is paramount. We will support any final decision that is taken by the Sahrawi on this issue. No solution can be imposed on the people of Western Sahara. We sincerely call on the Kingdom of Morocco and the Polisario Front to engage in direct political dialogue without any preconditions to reach a just and lasting political settlement.
For his part, Namibia's UN representative highlighted the situation in Western Sahara, emphasizing the need to end the last vestiges of colonial rule in Africa and affirming support for UN mission for a referendum in Western Sahara.
We cannot forget the situation in Western Sahara, a land still caught in the grip of colonialism decades after Resolution 690 promised a referendum of self-determination. Namibia acknowledges the urgency to address this last vestige of colonial rule in Africa and supports the role of the UN mission for the referendum in Western Sahara, a United Nations mandated mission. We call upon the international community to reaffirm its commitment to facilitating a fair and just referendum that will allow the Sahrawi people to determine their own future.
In the same way, Mozambique's UN representative voiced concern over the continued inclusion of 17 territories on the decolonization list and reaffirmed the Sahrawi people's inalienable right to self-determination.
It is in this connection that Mozambique is deeply concerned that 17 territories remain listed as non-self-governing, their people still awaiting the fulfillment of promises made decades ago. We are equally troubled that the peoples of Palestine and Western Sahara continue to be denied their inalienable right to self-determination.
On its turn, Cuba condemned Morocco's claimed autonomy in Western Sahara as a clear violation of international law and the UN Charter. Speaking at the UN General Assembly's 65th anniversary plenary, Cuban Permanent Representative Ernesto Sobran Guzman rejected unilateral decisions that ignore the rights and interests of the Sahrawi people.
Mi delegación se honra de ser coautora de la resolución 80/106.
We call for a just, lasting, and mutually acceptable political solution that enables the people of Western Sahara to freely exercise their right to self-determination in accordance with the United Nations resolutions. We do not support unilateral decisions that ignore the interests and rights of Sahrawi people, including proposals for so-called autonomy without sovereignty, as this constitutes a violation of international law, the UN Charter, and UN General Assembly resolutions 1514 and 2625.
Moving on to another topical development, this time in Gaza, where artillery shelling hit a school sheltering displaced people in the Tufah neighborhood northeast of Gaza City on Friday evening, killing 6 Palestinians and injuring others. The Palestinian news agency reported that the attacks violated a ceasefire, and Zionist occupation forces blocked ambulances and civil defense teams from reaching the site.
We were inside the school, in a safe place. We were surprised with rockets and missiles falling over us. They hit the innocent civilians in an extreme massacre. Those were innocent civilians, children, women, elderly and young people, 3-year-old, 5-year-old and so on.
The explosion happened while we were at the wedding. Unfortunately, we had to collect the bodies of children, the elderly, babies, women and young people. The ambulances and civil defense teams unfortunately couldn't get there because of the Israeli army.
The occupation military continues to violate the ceasefire in Gaza with heavy aerial and artillery strikes. According to the Palestinian news agency, intense airstrikes hit areas east of the Maghazi refugee camp in central Gaza and the city of Rafah in the south. The report adds that in Gaza City's Shuja'iyya neighborhood, buildings are being demolished amid the ongoing artillery shelling and gunfire from occupation helicopters. Meanwhile, Doctors Without Borders warns Gaza's children are facing life-threatening risks from the winter cold, calling on the Zionist entity to allow more humanitarian aid. A 29-day-old infant recently died of hypothermia, highlighting the urgent need for shelter, heating, and medical supplies. More on this story with Sofian Kanturi.
Doctors Without Borders has warned that children in Gaza Strip are at risk of dying from extreme cold. urging the Zionist entity to allow a significant increase in humanitarian aid so Palestinians can cope with harsh winter conditions. The organization said a 29-day-old infant died at Nasser Hospital in southern Gaza just 2 hours after being admitted to a pediatric ward support by Doctors Without Borders.
Yesterday, a 29-day-old infant died at Nasser Hospital in southern Gaza just 2 hours after being admitted to the Médecins Sans Frontières supported pediatrics ward in the early morning hours. Despite all medical efforts, the child could not be saved, and the Ministry of Health said the infant died as a result of severe drop in body temperature.
MSF warned that harsh winter weather, combined with dire living conditions, is sharply increasing health risks. It reported a rise in respiratory infections among children and expects cases to grow throughout winter, especially among those under 5-year-old. As winter deepens, the situation in Gaza is becoming increasingly life-threatening, especially for children and the most vulnerable. Aid groups warn that without urgent access to shelter, heating, and medical supplies, preventable deaths will continue.
And in another development, Hamas warned that plans to build a new settlement east of the occupied Al-Quds mark a dangerous escalation in the occupation settlement and annexation efforts. In a statement on Friday, the movement called the plan another violation of the international law, noting that continued settlement activity heightens tension and instability in the West Bank.
The approval by the extremist occupation government's finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, of a plan to establish a new settlement city east of occupied Al-Quds, comprising thousands of settlement housing units, constitutes a dangerous escalation in the settlement and annexation project. This settlement plan falls within a systematic policy aimed at Judaizing Al-Quds, isolating it from its Palestinian surroundings and altering its character and identity. It also represents a blatant assault on the rights of our people, their land, and their holy sites, and a clear disregard for the will and warnings of the international community.
And speaking of the international community, the United Nations has condemned sanctions imposed by the Trump administration on 2 International Criminal Court judges. The judges were investigating matters related to the occupation. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk stated on social media that the sanctions escalate retaliatory measures against international institutions. He emphasized that sanctioning UN judges, prosecutors, or experts is contrary to the rule of law and the administration of justice. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization reported that over 1,600 Sudanese have been killed in attacks on health facilities this year, confirming 65 verified incidents. These deaths account for 80% of all verified healthcare attacks in global humanitarian crises in 2025, bringing the total since the war began to more than 1,800. Still with Sudan, the African Union envoy to Sudan, Mohamed Baleish, condemned the Rapid Support Forces' systematic attacks on civilians as reprehensible, warning that those responsible will face justice. After meeting Sudan's Sovereign Council head Abdel Fattah al-Burhan in Port Sudan on Friday, Baleish denounced the killings and destruction of civilian infrastructure, reaffirming the AU's full commitment to supporting Sudan's sovereignty.
The systematic attacks on civilians, the killing of innocent people by the rapid support forces, and the destruction of civilian infrastructure are acts that are strongly condemned, and those responsible will not escape accountability. During these discussions with His Excellency the President, emphasis was placed on a firm commitment by the chairperson of the African Union Commission and the African Union Peace and Security Council to support Sudan's sovereignty and unity, and to reject any attempt to impose parallel institutions on its territory, as there is no room for the existence of any alternative entity outside the framework of the Sudanese state.
نسعى مع شركائنا لإحلال السلام في ربوع السودان الواحد الموحد.
And in another development in Africa, still ongoing clashes between M23 rebel group and the Congolese army in eastern DRC Congo have forced over 84,000 people to flee to Burundi this month. This marks the second major influx this year, putting significant strain on Burundi's resources. Here's Yassine Rikti.
At the Busuma Transit Center in northern Burundi, buses keep arriving one after another, carrying exhausted Congolese families fleeing the latest surge of violence in Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo. Most of the clashes are blamed on the M23 group, and thousands have been forced to cross the border, seeking safety from fear and uncertainty.
We have received, as of yesterday evening, more than 84,000 new arrival. And this is the highest influx that Burundi is experiencing. You would remember that at the beginning of the year already, following the crisis in Goma and Bukavu, Burundi received over 70,000 people then, plus those who have been living in the country. So currently Burundi is receiving over 200,000 Congolese refugees.
The reception conditions remain alarming. Basic sanitation is almost non-existent, while food and water supplies are dwindling. Endless queues from under the scorching sun as aid workers struggle to meet overwhelming needs. The World Food Programme warns its resources are nearly depleted, unable to keep pace with the relentless flow of new arrivals. In addition, shelters are gravely insufficient, leaving many exposed to torrential rains and biting cold. In these overcrowded and unsanitary conditions, cholera has begun to spread, adding yet more suffering to refugees.
Generally, for Burundi, the situation is quite overwhelming. The number of refugees in Burundi is quite high compared to the capacity of the country. The services which are not available, the outbreak of disease that is coming up with this emergency. We really need support. We need resources in order to put up the necessary shelter and provide assistance.
The numbers are staggering, but behind each statistic is a story. Mothers are cradling hungry children, elders clinging to fading memories of home, and young people desperately searching for safety. As the border crossings continue, aid agencies are calling for immediate international support to prevent the situation from turning even more dire.
And now the news in brief with Karim Mustafawi and Salman Aseb.
In Ukraine, 8 people were killed and 15 others injured after a Russian strike hit the port city of Odessa in the south. Authorities say the attack caused significant damage to civilian infrastructure.
In France, Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu admitted that lawmakers failed to pass the 2026 budget before year-end amid disputes between the two houses of parliament. Meanwhile, the French National Institute of Statistics reports public debt has hit a record of €3,482 billion by the end of September.
In Pakistan, a court sentenced former Prime Minister Imran Khan and his wife Bushra Bibi to 17 years in prison over a state gift fraud case. Khan denies the charges, calling them politically motivated.
In sports, the Confederation of African Football has approved holding the African Cup of Nations every 4 years starting in 2028. CAF President Patrice Motsepe says the change will better align African football with the global calendar.
And that's the end of our news. Thank you for watching, and bye-bye.